This is not part of our evening plans, part of the Miracle of Adoption, Hearts, Homes, and Holidays Anthology, written by Caroline Lee, narrated by Rick Barr. Anthology published by Bar 26 Publishing, LLC. Copyright 2021 by Carolyn Lee. All rights reserved. Not part of our evening plans. You want to head to trivia tonight? Dink looked up from their tiny kitchen table where she'd been staring out the window and nursing her coffee for the last 3 hours. Since last fall, when the doctor had given them the news, she'd done this more and more. She asked her husband, not sure if he'd said anything more and she'd just been too flaked out to hear him. Jace's handsome face softened. He stood by the front door to the tiny house they'd been renting for almost a year and a half, still bundled up in his winter gear. He held a handful of mail in one hand. They got all their mail directed to his accounting office here at River's End Ranch, and was peeling off his scarf with the other. Not for the first time, Dink wondered how someone as tall as her husband could manage to be comfortable in this tiny house. As it was, sitting at the kitchen table, she could reach out and touch him, standing at the front door. But they'd learned to manage, and it was fun. Besides, it was just the two of them. Would only ever be just the two of them. I asked, Jace repeated gently, if you wanted to go to trivia tonight. We haven't been in a while, and I recall you and I made a pretty good team. Dink snorted. I recall you didn't think I had anything to offer, Mr. Smarty Pants. You're remembering incorrectly, Jace deadpanned, slotting the mail into the appropriate bills to be addressed or wastebasket piles. She lifted her coffee to sip, but had long since gone cold. Did you just call me wrong? I did. Jace nodded too enthusiastically to be anything but teasing. That's the word I was looking for. A grin reluctantly pulled at Dink's lips. How long had it been since she'd let herself go and really laughed? She and Jace were so very different, but they'd made the perfect odd couple and were so good together. It wasn't until their infertility diagnosis that things had gotten choppy. After researching extensively, they'd decided not to tackle IVF, in vitro fertilization, because of the strain it would cause on Dink, their savings, and their relationship, and because the doctor said there was a low likelihood of it working. Jace had made his peace with not having biological children, but there were days like today, beautiful winter days where the snow was just begging to be played in, that Dink couldn't concentrate on her sewing, for all the obsessing she was doing over what it would be like to have a child. Hey, hon. Dink must have been quieter longer than she'd intended, because Jace stepped up behind her and rubbed his large hand down her back. She hummed in question, pretending she didn't know what he was going to scold her about, and started gathering up her coffee mug and the napkin with the cookie crumbs scattered across it. But he didn't scold her for getting dreamy, or remind her they'd made the decision together. Instead, he dropped a kiss to her head. I love you, Dink. She twisted in her chair and wrapped her arms around his waist, although she had to stretch up to do so. I love you too, she muttered against his jacket. So, let's get you bundled up and go get some pizza, huh? I'll bet we can kick Jacqueline and Simon's team's butt. She played along, knowing the only way to feel better was to pretend to feel better. Fake it till you make it. I think, since there's so many of them, the correct term is butts, husband. See? He knocked her with his hip. This is why I need you on my team. Pizza did sound good, even if it was a little early. I'll get my new scarf. And I'll get mine. He left it hanging at home since he claimed it clashed with his boring gray overcoat. In December, Jace had asked Dink to teach him to knit so they could knit each other Christmas presents. The request had been out of left field, and she'd been totally shocked. After all, her husband was a no-nonsense, straight-laced accountant, not at all the artsy type. It wasn't until their second lesson, curled up together on their tiny couch, that Dink had realized the truth. Jace had asked not because he cared about the outcome, but because he'd wanted to spend time with her. The request, and their subsequent knitting sessions, had been her favorite Christmas present of the year. So now she got her lumpy, lopsided beige scarf from its peg by the door, and Jace got his beautiful lime green and lavender one too, and they smiled as they each wrapped up tight. Her life might not be going exactly where she'd planned, but it was still pretty awesome. Impulsively, she stretched up on her tiptoes to kiss him quickly. "I love you." "You do?" He frowned. "Are you sure?" Her eyes widened. Had she done something to make him think otherwise? She'd been in a funk recently, but she always made sure he knew how much she appreciated his love and support. "Of course I do." He put his arms around her and pulled her closer. "Then you really should kiss me." Leaning closer, he lowered his voice. "Like this." Dink hummed in agreement when his lips caressed hers and wrapped her own arms around his middle, the highest she could reach. Even though they were both bundled up, she could feel his warmth and his touch. She loved him so much. "So, pizza?" he asked when they finally pulled apart. "Pizza," she agreed. He was pulling open the door when his phone rang loudly in his pocket, so he shut it again quickly. "Sorry." He pulled it out and checked the number. "It's not 5 o'clock. Could be the office, but I don't recognize the number." "Go ahead." Dink nodded with a smile. He clicked the green answer button. "Hello?" "Yes, this is Jace." Her husband's eyes slowly rounded. "Wait, hold on. I'm going to put you on speaker. Dink's here." He clicked the button and held up the phone. "It's Peggy, the social worker. Go ahead, Peggy." In the moment between the first sentence and the next, Dink's heart seized. Why was Peggy calling? Was it good news? They'd had their share of disappointments over the last few months, as potential adoptions had fallen through. Their preference was to adopt a baby, but there were so many being born with chemical dependencies and issues. It had been nearly heartbreaking to decide what was best. "Can you both hear me?" Peggy asked. Dink's throat had closed up, so she just nodded, even knowing the other woman couldn't hear her. Thank goodness Jace was calm enough to say, "Yes, we can." He fumbled for her hand, and Dink clasped it like a lifeline, even through 2 layers of gloves. "Okay, you two. I know we've been through your limits of what kind of dependencies you're willing to take in an infant. You said a non-smoker mother, so I need to ask you again. Are you okay with a mother who smoked occasionally during her 2nd and 3rd trimester?" Hold on." Jace pressed the phone against his thigh so Peggy wouldn't be able to hear their conversation. "What do you think?" he asked Dink. She just blinked up at him, not quite following this. Peggy was asking, what exactly? "Dink," he prompted, "are we okay with taking a baby whose biological mother smoked occasionally?" "Are we?" she whispered. He took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. "I am. I'd obviously prefer no foreign substances during pregnancy, but that's going to be hard to find. I think we should just say yes so we can increase our chances of being matched with a baby." "A baby?" "Then yes," Dink whispered. "I agree with you." His hold on her hand tightened, if that was possible, and he lifted the phone once more. "You still there, Peggy?" "Yep. Did you discuss?" Yes. He inhaled again. We agree, as long as the tobacco use was only occasional. Excellent. Peggy sounded as if she was checking boxes. And you said you were okay with a baby of mixed race, right? Dink snorted softly and offered Jace a watery smile. Her husband was not only biracial himself, he was a graduate of the state's foster system. Yes, she said. We most definitely are. Okay. It sounded like she was making more notes. And you've passed all of the tests you need on this end. You think you could stop by the store and grab a car seat on your way to the hospital? Dink's gaze slammed into Jace's. His dark skin had gone pale in shock, and she imagined she looked much the same. Her heart was pounding in her ears so loud, she didn't think she'd be able to hear anything Peggy said anyhow. But she had to ask. Why? Her strangled whisper wasn't loud enough, but Jace repeated it. Why? He asked into the phone. There was a pause, and Dink stared into her husband's eyes as a calm settled over both of them. Over the whole house. The whole world. Because, Peggy said lightly over the phone, your daughter was born yesterday and is ready to meet you. There was probably some screaming and yelling, and Dink definitely did some jumping up and down after the initial shock wore off. Thank goodness Jace was level-headed enough to take notes on everything they needed to know, because Dink didn't think she could concentrate on anything longer than a moment. A baby. They were going to meet their daughter. A daughter. Her eyes filled with tears. Their daughter. As Jace hung up the phone, she grabbed him around the middle. A daughter, he whispered, and she could tell from the way his voice caught he was close to tears. We're gonna have a baby, Jace. He squeezed her. Yeah, we are. A baby. They stood in silence for a long moment. All sorts of thoughts were running through her head. A bed for the baby, a changing pad, diapers, and wipes. Some infant layette, at least until Muzz and Ellie can go buy tiny little girl clothes. And I know they will. What else do we need ASAP? Oh, formula and bottles, duh. Where are we going to put all this stuff? We're going to need to look into larger apartments in town, I guess. It wasn't until she noticed Jace's silence that she stopped to wonder if he was thinking the same thoughts. What are you thinking about? His light brown eyes opened, and he stared down at her. A rare smile curved his wide lips upwards. A baby, huh? I'm going to be a daddy. I'm going to be a mommy. Wow. Are you happy? He squeezed. Only time I've been happier is that day, right here in this room. You agreed to marry me because I gave you those ridiculous boots. They both chuckled at the memory. Only what? Only, he dropped a kiss on her forehead. Only, this isn't at all how I imagined my evening going. Laughing, she tugged him towards the front door once more. This is better than trivia. Let's go buy a car seat, and diapers, and some formula. Thank you so much for listening to Dink and Jace's adoption story. If you'd like to read about their adorably turbulent courtship, check out Wild West Wedding, also by Caroline Lee. And you can follow up with them and their new family in Bigfoot Believer. Links can be found in the description below. This story has been shared with you to whet your appetite for a much larger collection of heartfelt stories. The Miracle of Adoption, Hearts, Homes, and Holidays is an anthology of holiday stories, all featuring the miracle of adoption. Christmas is all about family, and these stories will make you smile as this group of families and individuals open their hearts to someone who needs them. Check out The Miracle of Adoption, Hearts, Homes and Holidays. An order link is provided in the description below. This has been Not Part of Our Evening Plans, an epilogue to Wild West Wedding, written by Caroline Lee, narrated by Rick Barr, published by Bar 26 Publishing, LLC. Copyright 2021 by Caroline Lee. Production copyright 2021 by Caroline Lee. All rights reserved.